Hello, everyone. My name is Dale Matchek. I'm the chair of the Econ program here at Northwood University, and I'd like to welcome you to our Freedom Seminar. The theme of our 2024 Freedom Seminar is Decision 2024, the critical economic issues of the election. And this has been going on now. This is the fifth in our series, and it's going to continue all throughout the fall semester. You can find the other events listed on our website, northwood/freedomseminar.edu. So I urge you to go to that website and see all the other great events that we have planned. Be better informed as you prepare to vote this November. And, hopefully you can tell your friends about us too. Invite them. We are always welcoming members of the public as well as the Northwood community. So tonight we are going to discuss a very important topic, especially for the state of Michigan. We actually have two presentations related to minimum wage regulations. I'm not sure whether you're aware of it or not, but there are big changes coming to our minimum wage policies that are going to have a huge impact on Michigan businesses. And tonight we are pleased to welcome a couple of representatives from the Midland Business Alliance, which is a combination of the Chamber of Commerce and an advocacy development group for the Midland area. And we are going to have with us the president of the Midland Business Alliance, Tony Stamas. Please welcome Tony. Let me say a little bit about Tony before he speaks. First of all, he's a lifelong Midland resident with 30 years of expertise in business, government, and advocacy. If you've ever been to Pizza Sam's, that's his family. And he also has had much experience in politics, having served as both a state representative and a state senator from our district. He's a graduate of Michigan State University. And please welcome Tony Stamas.
Well, thank you. Great to be here with all of you. I'm going to bring up my counterpart, Diane Middleton, who is our Vice President of Advocacy, and we're going to tag team this year. And I'll give you a little. I appreciate that kind introduction. As noted, lived here my whole life, and family's had a restaurant here for 64 years. This community is part of who we are, and I love Northwood, and so we really appreciate the invitation to be here. I'm going to have Diane introduce herself, and we're going to talk about an issue that a lot of people probably aren't paying attention to, but it's going to have a huge impact on our state in the next years ahead and maybe decades.
All right. Well, thank you. This is really exciting for us to be here because you folks could be on either side of this issue as the employee or eventually as the employer. So we did a presentation last week, and those folks are pretty solidly in the employer camp. So this is interesting. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're interested. I am the Vice President of Advocacy for the Midland Business Alliance. In a nutshell, that means that I work with our elected officials on the local, state, and federal level to help promote public policy that benefits business. That's it in a nutshell. I was born and raised in Bay City. Now I live in Auburn, and I've spent 30 years in the chamber industry. 30 years, that's a long time. But my schooling, I earned degrees from Delta College and Western Michigan University, go Broncos, and then SVSU, go Cards. My degrees are in psychology and anthropology. So given what I do, it probably would have made more sense to come to Northwood. But I'm here in this moment, and I'm glad that you're here, and this is pretty exciting. So we hope that you think it is as well.
Thanks, Diane. So we're going to talk about an issue, and if you've seen anything out there, people talk about minimum wage, and that's part of it. There's also a couple parts of it that could be equally, if not even more impactful, called a tipped wage credit and paid sick leave. So first off, this is the legalese, which says, don't take this as a legal opinion. We're just giving you our perspective, or what I tell people is I'm a pizza maker by training. If you need an attorney, feel free to do that. But we get this from our friends at the Michigan Chamber. So we've got two new laws, and they're about minimum wage and the elimination of the tip credit, and then paid sick leave. And so these came about back in 2018. So in Michigan and in other states, you can go out and get signatures to put a proposal on the ballot. And so, it's 370,000 signatures, and you go out. Generally, you get a group that has a specific interest in that said topic, and they go out and they accumulate the signatures, and then, people challenge them, so you have to have enough. So they got signatures on these two issues back in 2018. And we looked those, and at that time I was working for the Small Business Association of Michigan, a great group that works with small businesses. But whether it was the Small Business Association of Michigan, the Michigan Chamber, the Manufacturers Association, NFIB, we all saw this as being a huge problem. As we reviewed it, in particular the paid sick leave, someone said, well, if they just did what California did, it would be reasonable. Now, if that's your standard for reasonable, it kind of from the business community sets the parameters of why we thought this was so concerning. But one of the things we talked to is, people say, well, you're the Midland Business Alliance. Okay, this is going to hurt businesses. Some care, some don't care. But what we're trying to tell everybody is it's not just the business community. This has implication for all employers. The way this is set up, it impacts businesses, it impacts nonprofits, it impacts universities, it impacts governmental entities, with the only exception of being the federal government, because the state can't put those parameters on the federal government. So it affects everybody. It affects you if you have one employee, if you have part-time employees, if you have seasonal employees. So everybody will be impacted by this. So when we did this, we got the two ballot initiatives. And what Michigan law allows is you get those signatures, the Secretary of State verifies there's enough signatures, and then legislature has a choice. They can adopt it as it is, and it becomes law. They can ignore it, not do anything, and then it goes before the voters, and the voters have a chance to vote on it. Or they can adopt it and amend it. So they can take it in, and then they can change it. And so as we looked at it, people say minimum wage, just in terms of the general public, it was going to pass 60-70%. The paid sick leave is hugely problematic, but it's a difficult issue to kind of have a broad debate on. So we said we wanted the legislature to adopt it and then amend it, kind of fix some of the more onerous pieces of that. And so at that time, and political makeup does matter, elections have consequences. You'll hear that regularly, I think. At that time, we had a Republican state house, state senate, and a Republican governor. And so we said, we really need you to adopt this and then and make some changes. And that was in the same year, because the governor was changing that next January in 2019. So we did get the legislature to adopt it. They made what we thought were very reasonable changes to that. And so that became the law of the land. Now, the folks who supported this were not fans of that approach. They wanted to see the original form that it was put in take place. So they went to the courts, which was their prerogative. And our courts hopefully moved justly, but not quickly. So they reviewed it and went through every level of the court since 2019. And it went to the Court of Appeals. It went to finally the Michigan Supreme Court. And they said, we will rule on this by the end of July of 2024. So on July 31st, 2024, they ruled on it. And they said it was unconstitutional because it was done in the same legislative session. So when the legislature goes in, you have a kind of a 2-year session. So if you you take office in 2019, that session is 2019 or 2020. So this was the same session where they adopted it and they changed it. Now, some might argue they don't really see clarity there in the law where it says you can't do that. In fact, our former Attorney General, who happens to be from Midland, Bill Schuette, had ruled you could do that. But in 2019, the legislature changed, or the governor's office changed. A few years later, the legislature changed, and the courts changed as well. So on a 4-3 ruling along partisan lines, the court said you could not do this. Now, again, I'm not sure what the statutory legal authority is, but they did seem to recognize that it was going to be a challenge. So they said, you have until 2025, February 21st, before this will begin to take effect. So there's a bit of a window here, an opportunity to change that. We're well past when it was first adopted. So you could make the changes, but we have a Democratic House, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic governor. And so the inclination to make changes on this are going to be probably very different. And so, like I said, and Diane's going to talk about the specifics on these, but you've got minimum wage and it sets set rates. To be honest, where the economy's gone in recent years, the markets probably put these rates above what this proposal would put it. So I don't think that's when people are focusing a lot on. The tipped wage is going to be a huge problem. And Diane will talk about that because a lot of folks do better with the tipped wage than they're going to be if they go to the minimum wage. And the paid sick leave, if you're a small business, large business, nonprofit, or government, is going to be hugely problematic. And I think for a lot of businesses that are already on the margin, they're going to have to make decisions about whether they're able to navigate that. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have to say, okay, how can I get into this and navigate that? So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Diane.
All right. Thank you. So I'm going to help unpack this a little bit. And before I do that, I just want to point out what you see on the screen, the One Fair Wage Initiative and the Time to Care Initiative. Those are not unique to Michigan. These citizens ballot initiatives are stemming from nationwide organizations that target and then kind of infiltrate specific states where they think they can get a foothold, and they start a ballot initiative to shape public policy. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. This may happen in other places. The past, I don't know, a dozen years or so, we have seen these kinds of things coming to Michigan. They're kind of cropping up in Michigan. So the whole opportunity for a citizens ballot initiative for that, that's a thing here in Michigan, right? Well, I don't know. That's it's a little bit problematic because you don't quite know what you're going to get. So, but anyway, this is what we have right now. So let's unpack this a little bit. All right. Minimum wage increase, and I'm just going to outline what's going to happen here. And as Tony said, this is the piece that we really see as less problematic because the market has driven wages up already anyway, especially through COVID and whatnot. So right now, a minimum wage in Michigan is $10.33 an hour, right? We are going to go under this new law that will go to $12.48 on February 21st. So that's $2 plus increase to the minimum wage at one time. That'll happen in February. Then in years 2026, 2027, and 2028, you're going to see more bumps. They'll bump again so that by February 21 of 2028, that minimum wage is going to reach just under $15 an hour, which was the goal of that citizens ballot initiative. But we're not done. After 2028, according to the new law, the minimum wage will continue to increase, and those increases will be tied to the rate of inflation. So it'll be an automatic thing. All right. So there's that. That's minimum wage. Oh, there's one exception. The training wage. Apparently there's a thing in Michigan. The training wage, as you can see, it's pretty low. But as someone pointed out to me the other day, when you have places like McDonald's that are already offering $15 an hour starting, I'm not even sure the training wage is a thing anymore. It's officially a thing in Michigan, but I don't think it's being used much, but there is an exception in the law for it. So that is minimum wage. Now let's talk about tip credit. So most of you are probably aware, the best example, when you go to a restaurant, your wait staff is on a tip credit wage type of system. So they are not getting paid 100% of minimum wage. Right now, they're getting 38% of minimum wage from their employer, because the assumption is that the tips they make from customers is going to bring them up to that 100% minimum wage. However, remember what Tony said, it's very often well beyond 100%. If you are a very experienced wait staff, you know how to take very good care of your customers, you work in a higher end restaurant, and you have kind of an established clientele who looks for you when they come in the door, you're going to make some really good money. All right, so just keep that in mind. Right now, the tip credit is 38%. Again, restaurants are paying their wait staff only 38% of $10.33 an hour. On February 21st, that's going to go to 48%. I am not good at math, but whatever that 48% is. Then, same thing as with minimum wage, on February 21st of 2026, 2027, and then 2028, that percentage is going to increase. When we hit February 21st of 2028, that tip credit is going to go away because they are now earning 100% of minimum wage. Now, the theory with the Citizens Ballot Initiative was that wait staff would get 100% of minimum wage and tips on top. Folks, I don't know if that's going to happen, because what you definitely will see happen is a drastic increase in labor costs for restaurants. Now, they're going to have to pass that along to their customers. There's not going to be any way around this. So your customer base is now paying a lot more for their burger and fries, or whatever it is they're getting. They're paying a lot more. So I don't know how likely it is that folks are going to continue to tip 20, 25% when they've already incurred those increased costs. Additionally, about 2/3 of restaurants in the state have said, wow, this new law, it puts our future in jeopardy. We don't know if we're going to make it. We just don't know if we can absorb. We don't know if we can do it, if we can absorb this. So that's a problem. All right. So that is the tip credit. By the way, the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association is very opposed to this because they know the impact it's going to have on restaurants, the impact it's going to have on wait staff. And wait staff has been very vocal. I think it was yesterday, there was kind of a rally on the front lawn of the Michigan Capitol by wait staff. And they want their tip credit because ultimately they make a lot more money with a tip credit system by and large. All right, so that's tip credit. All right, let's talk a little bit about paid sick leave. And as Tony said, this is much more complex than the minimum wage and much more concerning, frankly. It doesn't read very well. It's a little bit complicated. So let me kind of simplify this whole thing. All employees in the state of Michigan will earn 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 worked. When I say all, I mean all. Like Tony said, whether you're a micro business, a nonprofit, state or local government, whether you're a faith-based organization. My sister works for the Catholic Diocese of Gaylord, and she and I have talked about this a lot because they're gearing up for it too. Maybe you're a school, maybe you're Northwood, maybe you're a local school district. Everybody in the state of Michigan, the exception is the federal government. So if you work directly for the federal government, then this does not apply to you. But you can see how vast this is. I mean, this is everybody from the little 7-Eleven on the corner up to state government and everyone in between. I'm going to put a tiny disclaimer in here because we've been trying to get clarification from the state on independent contractors. I asked the state directly, could you please clarify, does this pertain to independent contractors or not? The answer I got back is that it will only apply to employees from whom the employer is required to withhold for federal income tax purposes. Anyway, it's a little bit fuzzy. We are asking for clarification on that. All right. Now, remember I said 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 worked, right? There is no cap on how many hours an employee can accrue. No cap. And they keep going. They just keep building. Whenever that business's year is done, whatever fiscal calendar they're on, it just keeps rolling. They can keep building those hours. They're not wiped out at the end of the business's year. But there is a cap on usage for the employees. There's a cap on usage. Oh, yes, Jim.
Yeah, so if it's going to roll over,
yeah,
is the employer going to be required to pay that out in separation with an employer?
I'm getting there.
Sorry.
Nope, we have heard that question countless times because it could be pretty costly, right? For someone who's pretty healthy and yeah. So we're going to get there. No cap on how many you can accrue and you can carry over, but there is a cap on usage. The cap is no less than 72 hours a year, okay? And you have to track all this. If you're a business, you need to track this. You need to track the accrual. Sorry, talking with my hands. And you need to track the usage. You'd have to do it anyway, right? Because it kind of gets a little bit messy. But the state has the right to come into your business at any time and inspect said records 3 years back. So it's really important that you do track that just to keep yourself covered, right?
And I might note, a lot of businesses and a lot of organizations have gone away from sick leave and just gone to PTO days.
Mm-hmm.
You have so many days off. You don't really care why you take it off. You don't feel well, take it off. If you're going to do something with family, you take it off. And so they've kind of wanted to move away from that.
Mm-hmm.
This will change that. And, I think what we suspect is if you have PTO days, it will get reduced by the proportion it needs to go for sick leave days, which are supposed to only go for sick leave. And then you may have some PTO days left. So I think for reasons you can imagine, people said, okay, we don't need to get into why individuals are gone. So we'll just go to personal time off. This will force you to go back to that system.
Yeah, no, that is a very important distinction. And unfortunately, that's more complicated for businesses and for employees as well. Now, how is this going to get paid? Well, for employees working in a business of 10 employees or more, remember, they can use up to 72 hours a year if they've earned it. You have to earn it. You have to accrue it. All 72 hours of sick leave are paid. Now, if you're working in a business with 9 or fewer employees, the first 40 hours will be paid. The remaining 32 hours, it's up to the employer if they'd like to pay that or not. The numbers are starting to get fun, right? Again, no cap on accrual, 1 hour for every 30 worked, but you are capped. The employer can cap that usage of sick time at no more than 72 hours a year. So you could accrue and accrue and accrue and accrue and accrue, but you may only be able to use 72 a year. We think that's a little bit strange. It may actually have been a mistake in the way the ballot initiative was put together. We're not really sure. Now, I want to make sure to answer Jim's question about carryover. Yes, and that's where that comes in. If you accrue and accrue and accrue and accrue, and all of a sudden you say, I'm out, I've got a different job, whatever, the employer is not required to pay out those accrued sick hours unless your employee handbook implies that you're going to pay employees for any benefits that they've earned. Yeah, it's starting to get a little bit fun and a little bit fuzzy. So, oh yes, oh yes.
So I suppose that's an upside.
I mean, but so it's the 1978 Public Act 390 entitled the Payment of Wages and Fringe Benefit Act that may require payment upon termination pursuant to the employer's written policy or contract. So what this is going to do is probably force a lot of employers to update their employee handbook to be very specific about what gets paid out when those employees leave. Okay, does that answer your question, Jim? Okay, all right. Okay. Oh, you did? Okay, all right. All right, so let's talk about the flexibility of how the sick leave can be used by the employee. No notice, there is no notice, no advance notice required. In fact, no notification at all is required if and until the employee misses 3 consecutive days. So folks, if you're running a business, now in some businesses, maybe if you've got 500 employees and people can backfill for one another all over the place, okay, maybe that's not such a big deal. But imagine if you are a health system, or you're a fire department, or you're a police department, or you're a professor and we need you to show up at a certain time because things are happening at a certain time, then that could be really problematic. So no documentation, no notification at any time is required until the employee misses 3 consecutive days. Now, if I miss 3 consecutive days, haven't let Tony know, Tony comes into my office on the 4th day when I return and he says, hey, you've been gone. And I say, oh, sick leave. And he says, doctor's note, please. Then I am required to supply him with a doctor's note, but no, HIPAA laws and everything does not have to include the condition or illness or injury or anything like that. However, if I have incurred cost out of my pocket, copay at the doctor's office, bus fare, mileage, childcare, whatever, if I have paid anything out of my pocket to acquire said note from my doctor, he's paying for it. The employer is paying for it. So there's that. Another note about how this can be taken. It can be taken it could be in tiny little increments. And it can't be bigger than an hour. The employer can't impose an increment larger than an hour. So for example, if it's taken in the smallest increment that the employer utilizes in their payroll system. So if you're a coffee shop and you record Susie's attendance in tenths of an hour, then Susie can take her sick leave, again, no notice, in 6-minute increments. So what this does is sets up a scenario where you could have, as a business, you could have employees repeatedly using just a little bit of time every day, coming in late, leaving early, whatever, extended lunch hour, whatever, and asking you to just apply that to their sick time. Now, I hope that doesn't happen, but the law certainly doesn't say that it can't. So there's that. Now, right now, Michigan operates under a Paid Medical Leave Act. That's the act that Tony talked about that was passed in 2028 when the legislature said, we need to make changes to this. Let's amend it. The Paid Medical Leave Act was one of those acts that came out of that amendment action. So we operate under that right now. That act allows employees to utilize sick leave not only for their own medical issues, sickness, injury, whatever, but if they are caring for a loved one, you've got to take your kiddo to urgent care, whatever, it allows you to do that. Now, the new legislation, by the way, this is called the Earned Sick Time Act, ESTA. So if you see that, we're talking about this new legislation. The ESTA will allow not just the employee to use sick leave for themselves, for their close relations, but in fact, for anyone with whom they say, well, they really feel like family to me. I have such a close relationship. They really feel like family to me. And it's called an affinity. If you have an affinity with this individual that you deem to be as close as family, then you can use your sick leave when that person is dealing with medical issues as well. So that's kind of fuzzy. It's a little bit fuzzy. This is an extremely liberal application of sick leave, I think. As Tony said, we've seen these things coming from other states that are pretty liberal, and this is certainly a good instance of that. Now, I've got one more thing that I want to cover, and this is a little bit wild, but let me just share this with you. It's called rebuttable presumption of retaliation. What the heck is that? All right. So the rebuttable presumption of retaliation essentially says when your employee takes sick leave for whatever reason, they take sick leave. If after they've taken that sick leave, you as the employer discipline them for any reason, the assumption is that you have retaliated against them for utilizing sick leave. All right. Now that flies in the face of what, how the rule of law usually works, because usually you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. But in this case, essentially, the employer is presumed to have retaliated, and the responsibility will be on the employer to prove themselves innocent.
Yeah.
No? Okay. Okay.
So I think yeah, Jim.
Yes.
So I've got documented evidence of misbehavior.
Yeah.
That would, I
Yeah.
could use that to support And then
Mhm.
I would hopefully not be found guilty of it.
Right,
Right.
right.
Document anything.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to be assumed on the account.
Oh, you
The-
better
The
document.
presumption is that it wasn't legitimate, and then if you can defeat that presumption, but they start off with the presumption that you did not have just cause.
So the proof has to be well documented. and
Correct.
it's gonna be more
Right.
than
Right, exactly, exactly. Okay, so I think I've pretty much covered the components of the paid sick leave. We do want to iterate, this applies to all employees. I had someone call me yesterday and say, yeah, but I employ mostly minors, so it doesn't apply to us, right? And I said, no, this will apply to you as well. And we've covered these. Anything except a federal employee, independent contractors, we're still waiting to get the final word on that. So what in the heck are we doing? I want to point this out. Even labor unions. If a union is under a collective bargaining agreement let's put it this way. The next time they negotiate a collective bargaining agreement, if it's supposed to take effect after February 21st, that collective bargaining agreement is going to include this language. So yeah, it applies to everyone. All right, so what are we doing? So there are, as Tony said, there are conversations about minimum wage and elimination of the tip credit in Lansing right now. In a nutshell, organized labor does not want any change to the tip credit at all. They haven't talked about, they didn't specifically mention minimum wage, but that law, that minimum wage increase and the elimination of tip credit, they want that to stay just as it is. They haven't said anything about the paid sick leave. But we are part of a coalition of over 70 business organizations. I know you can't see them, but just know that there's a lot. Who are advocating strong for 5 specific changes to paid sick leave in particular. Number one, we think that organizations that already offer 72 hours should be just left alone. Just let them do their thing. It's working for them. Let them do that. How about if we exempt small businesses? For example, businesses that aren't even subject to the federal Family Medical Leave Act. Maybe we should leave those folks alone. Let's specifically say, no, this doesn't apply to independent contractors, temporary workers, et cetera. Let's get rid of that tiny little increment that the time can be used in. Let's get rid of that terrible idea of assuming the employer has done something to violate someone's rights under the Paid Sick Leave Act. And then let's specifically say employers can front load those 72 hours because that's a lot easier for those folks, and that's what we would like. So again, this is the coalition. And things are moving pretty fast. Right. Well, they're moving fast and they're moving slow. Yes, Jim.
I know, I keep coming, sorry.
No, it's okay.
So, in that I can't say that word.
Advocacy.
Thank you.
Yes.
PTO, I'm assuming they would like PTO to count. So if it's 72 hours of PTO, that would be the equivalent of sick leave, or you have to have 72 hours of sick leave.
I think you would do, if you have PTO days and that's all you had, you would redefine that as sick leave days.
Okay. Just,
Yeah.
But
define
yeah, you'd have to
Just to
have
be-
that, but you probably
yeah.
would have to specifically say that's sick leave.
And part of the reason we recommend that is because right now, the way the law is written, you can combine them if you want, but then all of the available time off in that bucket is subject to the same rules as the paid sick leave. So, yes.
To kind of help out, I guess, the employer, are they planning to maybe increase taxes instead of like just expecting
Yeah.
the business or the employer to kind of pay all this sick leave or pay PTO if they still use it?
Yeah, there hasn't been a proposal on that. I mean, right now where we stand, the legislature is in session tomorrow, maybe the last real day they'll be in session before the election. They've got a couple days, but I don't know that. So it'll probably come up what's lame duck session after the election, but before the end of the year. But no, I think the onus is going to be on the businesses. The businesses, if you're already operating on a tight margin, 3-4%, this is on you. And, we've talked to people that, that they may make 100,000 in a given year. This is going to take that all off the table. And so that's the question is, how many businesses will just say, I can't afford to do this? And how many businesses won't open because they're going to look at that? So
Yeah.
we're hoping, we've talked to people on both sides of the aisle, and I think almost all of them have recognized it's a problem. But recognize the problem, the collective will to solve it are two different things. Depending how the elections go, the state Senate's not up for election this year, nor is the governor. So the only one that could change is the state House could become a Republican, which is possible. If that happens, are they more inclined to do it while they still have Democratic control, or would they rather pass it on so the Republicans have to take a share of the credit/blame in the next year? But that's a tight time frame because you get a new legislature comes in and they don't even take office till about the second week of the new year. So a great question. But I think as it stands right now, all those costs will be on the business.
The Citizens Ballot Initiative organizations that put this together, they're working in the best interest of the employee, and they've got the best intentions for the employee. So they're not going to take anything away. They're not going to take anything away from the employees at all. They're not going to, save them money, increase their pay over here, and then tax them over here. I don't think that's likely. Tony is spot on. This is a problem squarely on the shoulders of businesses
And
With
nonprofits and pretty much everybody.
employers.
Yeah, we work with a lot of nonprofits with the Midland Business Alliance, a lot of great folks who do wonderful work. They are not running those on any margins of, they're going to have to make some tough decisions, and some are going to have to decide, are we able to still keep operating and doing the work that we feel to work, to do as a nonprofit? And so, I say, okay, if you're not empathetic towards the business community, which we obviously are, we're a business organization, but this goes well beyond that. And I think it'll be interesting to see. The unions have come out and said, like Diane said, they want to leave minimum wage and they want to leave the tip credit. I still not clear what the logic is on the tip credit, but they want to leave that. But they haven't talked as much about the sick leave. And so maybe the optimist in me wonders if they don't recognize just how incredibly problematic it's going to be. But sometimes you could see something and you can't say it either.
Yes.
States like Indiana and Ohio have this in place, or are they considered?
I haven't looked at, like Dan said, there's kind of groups, but they look for opportunities in states where they can do that. So no.
This will make us less competitive.
Yes, very
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it will. There are, I think probably if you looked at a map and you guessed which states have some version of this, you would not be surprised. The states kind of reflects the politics of that state.
But I will point out that rebuttable presumption of retaliation, Michigan is the only one who has that. We're the only state that has that.
Yeah.
So going back when you guys mentioned minimum wage increase, and then it said after 2028, it'll automatically increase tied to the rate of inflation.
Right.
Won't minimum wage and inflation just kind of keep feeding off each other and we just keep having this
Yes.
compounding effect?
Yes. And I think part of it is, you're trying to look at the crisis point. Okay, what's right in front of us? But you're right. Long term, part of this, the argument would make is, since 2018 they set these standards. Well, the market has strongly exceeded those numbers. But eventually, that's gonna be a huge problem.
But we've seen this in action in states like Washington and California, where the minimum wage in particular goes up. Great. It feels good until the employees realize that their costs of living are also increasing and they're in the same boat. Or if they've hit a benefit cliff, they could be worse off. So the short answer to your question is, yeah.
And some places, businesses have decided we're no longer going to operate here. And I mean, that's the, again, in this case, a nonprofit isn't going to move out to Indiana. They just might not continue to do the work they were doing.
So Tony, if I may real quick, I think what you said is the free market actually worked, right? And wages increased because the demand.
Bingo.
Everyone would just stay out of the way, the
Yes.
free market might just.
Bingo. Yes.
I would not argue at all with that. I would strongly concur.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
Kate.
Yeah, two questions. The first one is, something special about Northwood is that our students can begin taking internships as soon as the first summer
Yeah.
after their first year here. Do you anticipate that internships might be the first things on the chopping block when?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think people are going to look at what's essential and, going through the bureaucracy. So yeah, you could certainly see that where they're like, okay, we're just trying to navigate this and this is what we need. And we like to do that. But right now we can't do things that we just like to do because operationally we're just trying to keep our head above water.
Mhm.
Yeah, interesting. And then the other question is regarding exempt and non-exempt employees. So are basically salaried employees going to have to track every single hour worked now?
So the way we understand it, exempt employees will be assumed to be working 40 hours a week, period. That's the way we understand it.
But in terms of tracking, it will be all on the business. So
Yes.
if that's not right,
You-
then the business will have
Right.
to.
You still have to track.
Yeah.
You still have to track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned, really since COVID, as the labor market stagnant, competitive
Right.
wage went up. It's kind of a similar burden on businesses, isn't it? And have they raised prices in response, or how they coped to the rising cost of labor in the last few years?
Mhm.
And what can that teach us about how they might respond to these legislative changes?
I think we've seen the inflationary impact, and that's something that, as we go into this election cycle is much debated. And, there definitely seems to be a cause and effect there.
Mhm.
And, you put this on top of that, from our end, you kind of see this national debate, but if it's unique to Michigan, it is going to put Michigan at a disadvantage.
Mhm.
And
And for your members, just anecdotally, do you know how they're adjusting in terms of maybe limiting hours or limiting, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
perks like internships or training? Do you have any anecdotal evidence to say how much they're trying to pass it on to their customers at the moment, higher prices?
I don't know that they're that far yet. I think
well, not in this, but in the
Right.
broader economy, yes.
yes,
Yeah.
we are, we've been working since August 1st, literally to inform our members. There's been a learning curve because, as I gave the example of the business that employed mostly minors, there are still many businesses out there that don't realize this is going to apply to them. We have been encouraging our businesses to get ready for it. Just get ready for it the way it is. My gut feeling is we won't see a change, at least for the paid sick leave, and probably until February,
Yes.
if anything.
So I'm just looking at the legislature for the updated policy effective in February.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And it says that if the sick time is, or the use of the sick time is foreseeable, it says not to exceed 7 days prior to the date the during sick time is begin. So you can actually, from what I understand, you can
Mhm.
actually require advance notice. It's not a case of people can just show up and it's fine.
Well, if it's foreseeable, if it is foreseeable, then you can require advance notice.
And then it
But if
says-
we're talking about illness, it's often not foreseeable. And in this instance, you can not inform your employer.
Well, it says an employer may require, if it's not foreseeable, an employer may require the employees to give notice to the attachments as soon as practical.
Right.
So that,
Yes.
to me, that mandates if you're sick one day
Mhm.
before you start work that day, you need to. of course,
Well-
notify the business.
That could be, but as
then
soon as
once
practical
it's done,
is open for interpretation, right?
Yeah.
And,
I agree that
mhm,
it's not quite as clear as it should be.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
How I'm-
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, and I think from the business end, I mean, often with so many businesses, the HR person is the same as the finance person, is the same person taking out the trash and fixing the light bulbs. So yeah, I mean, you can look at that, and that's how it is often with legislation. You can look at that and say, okay, if people deal with this reasonably,
Mm-hmm.
but in so many cases, it's not dealt with reasonably. And so, you want to provide clarity. You don't want to have that uncertainty if you're trying to run that business or if you're trying to start a business. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, if everybody worked at it in good faith and reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
but I just think there's a lot of concern that won't be the end result that we'll see.
So this is actually touched upon in one of the 5 modifications that our coalition is pushing for, and you can see it noted on the last bullet point. And I don't know exactly what the language will be, but we are looking for something more clear than what is there right now, because again, it's open for interpretation. In some businesses, it's more important than others.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not too familiar with the ground reality. Could you sort of elaborate on what a typical days of leave that business allow to their workers?
Currently,
Yeah, correct.
well,
Well, I mean, there's the federal page.
the Federal Medical or Family and Medical Leave
Right.
Act. Okay. So I'm not well versed in the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, but that does apply to employers with 50 or more employees. And it provides guidelines for what needs to be given, et cetera, et cetera. And again, applies only to employers with 50 or more. Interestingly, this law does not mention the FMLA at all. We're assuming that employers with 50 or more are going to have to kind of interlace those together and abide by both. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Yeah, I just asked that question because to me, 72 hours per year does not seem to be too extravagant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of employers, again, it's a competitive marketplace. They offer, no, they don't do sick days. Often they do
Mhm.
personal time off because
Mhm.
they think that's easier from both sides of that. So they offer that. But that's a competitive, when we hire people, that's one of the things they
Mhm.
look at. Okay, how many days off do we get a year? And that's a fair question to make.
Mhm.
But versus setting it across the board for part-time employees, for seasonal employees,
Right.
across the board for if you have one employee on your team,
Mhm.
we think that this is just sending it across for so many that for businesses that are just struggling on a margin. It's not going to be whether they think it's a good idea or not. It's going to be whether they think they can continue to operate or not. And
Yes.
again, we see that in a lot of places where businesses have a choice too. As much as they might love being in business, they just said, I can't keep going forward in this environment. And obviously,
Right.
we're hoping. We want to see Michigan grow. We want to see entrepreneurs take that. We want to see businesses that have been legacy businesses here grow. And so, trying to put this burden on them, I think gives us great pause.
Mhm. Yeah, and 72 hours, you're right, it's 9 days. But as Tony alluded to, depending on the business, 9 paid sick days may be a lot. It may be a lot. It may be something that the employer just can't provide or can't provide with the provisions that are laid out in this law. So again, that's why I say I'm sure the citizens ballot initiatives were well intentioned, but there's just so much in here that just seem to be unintended consequences and will really make things difficult for businesses.
And this proposal doesn't take that away. It assumes that will
Right.
still happen.
Right.
It just says that if you're already exceeding it,
Mm-hmm.
then you don't have to.
Right.
Then you've already met it if you meet or exceed it. So I think what we're working on as a legislative remedy
Mhm.
that would still exist.
Right, and it's we're only asking for 5 modifications, 5. very specific modifications. And as Tony said, we would retain that 72 hours, just in how you apply it and how you work with that as a business.
Yes.
Yes.
What's the reception then towards these 5 modifications that you guys have?
You know, I think what we've heard as we've talked to local legislators is they recognize it's a problem. And I've heard this, bipartisan basis. They recognize the problem, there's an issue. I don't think we've heard a lot of specifics yet in terms of where they're at. And it's in the middle of an election season and people are out knocking on doors. And so, we're trying to make sure this is on their radar. And again, there's a lot of people. It's the Restaurant Association, it's the Michigan Chamber, a lot of folks, large and small, are trying to put it on their radar. So when they do come back after the election, but I've heard people who are, pretty far, to the to the right, you would certainly say, okay, yeah, we see this problem, but to the left have said, yeah, this is a real problem. We need to solve it. So I feel like there's a pretty consensus recognition it's a problem. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be consensus in terms of what the solution looks like. Yeah.
Yes.
What can a Michigan resident do to help with your advocacy efforts?
We need employers of all types, sizes, longevity, whatever. The best thing that you can do is get in touch with your lawmakers. Even supply them with a spreadsheet and show them this is how much this is going to cost. If you can share your story about how this is going to impact your business, your ability to keep your doors open, keep employing people, right? Businesses want and need to employ people. That's what they really need to hear. It's one thing for the lawmakers to hear from a coalition of business organizations. It's another thing for them to hear from, their local restaurant or local grocery store, whatever, saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep my doors open, or I just don't know how I'm going to manage this. I'm worried about people showing up for their shift on time. We had a conversation the other day with a gentleman who wanted to know if we were working on this because his company provides care for older adults who need help at home. He said, I need these people to show up on time where they're expected. Get in touch with your lawmakers, share your story. It does not have to be long. It does not have to be profound or complicated. We can provide businesses with a direct link to lawmakers and even a message that you can customize so that you can deliver your story. That's what we need. And we'll continue working on this, but
Many years ago, the Democratic Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, one of his political axioms was all politics are local. And, at the end of the day, people are running to get in the State House and the Senate, they're running for office, and they have to, get the votes, and they have to get more than their opponent, and they have to have that local connectivity. So I think there's it's amazing sometimes on really vital issues, how little legislators hear from back home. If they hear a lot of voices, I believe the system will work and they will be responsive.
yes.
So regarding the retaliation, so we're talking about how assuming that the employer is guilty first of that.
Yes.
So if you look at it the other way, the employee, what current rights and methods do the employee have, assuming they're innocent and they've been wrongfully disciplined? What rights do they currently have and methods to test that at the moment?
Yeah, they do. And again, I'll go back to my first preface that neither of us are attorneys, but yeah, there are avenues for employees to say we've been mistreated. There are unfair employment practices, both at the state and the federal level. Now, whether people think those are strong enough, I mean that's always up for debate, and oftentimes you have legislation introduced again at the state and the federal level. But we just think the out-and-out presumption that the employer is wrong is problematic. But yeah, I mean, we should. I mean, you hear stories of employees being in a bad position, and they should have those rights, and they should have that ability, and we certainly don't want to take from that. Yeah, good question.
Yes.
So combining what's happening in Michigan with the proposals at the federal level with accepting tips from income tax.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, the model that we've used for a long time in terms of, service workers
Right.
being tipped,
Mhm.
everybody's gonna want to shift from wages to tips.
Right.
Of course, our law won't allow that, or.
Right.
That's
So
interesting.
what do you anticipate is the new model for service workers? I mean, how is this gonna affect the relative wages of dishwashers and people in the front?
Oh, that's an
You know,
interesting
how is that
question.
gonna be managed?
And it's a great point because I mean, on both candidates for president have said they support that concept. But if you're moving to an economy that lessens tips because you've increased the salary, and so one, the businesses aren't as focused on that, and secondly, individuals, as Diane said, may not feel the inclination. That's gonna, we had a Midland Daily News interviewed, and if you go downtown, there's lots of nice restaurants. Grassi, who maybe you go to for that fancy occasion. Bryn Star, which is really a nice but one of the employees at Bryn Star said, "I'm going to take a huge salary cut on this," and I think that was very telling. For those that can survive, I think we'll continue to see automation. You go to the
Yeah.
grocery store and you do the
Mhm.
self-checkout, and
Mhm.
I think we'll continue to see that. And
Mhm.
in some ways, some of these jobs, which often with businesses, are really the first step to going into the employment space. You're learning the skills, you're learning, getting the tools that are going to serve you throughout life. Some of those opportunities are just not going to be available anymore,
Mhm.
and I think that's that could be a real shame.
Mhm.
So one thing with like a lot of sales positions, they're not necessarily based on salary, but like a commission.
Mhm.
Is there any implications like this? For like a commission job, you may not be working a set 40 hours, but it pays a certain percentage of, whatever you sell.
Yeah.
Is there any implications for like
Huh.
commission-based
Yeah.
employees?
That's a great question.
That's
I
a
don't.
good
Yeah, I
question.
don't think so. I think though, but I mean, as you get down there, but yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there would be in terms of commission based. Whether you're working in retail or you're selling products for a large manufacturer. But I mean, as you deal with these, you never know what's next.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of our session.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys would want to stick around and ask any, in case there are any questions left unasked,
Mhm.
but in any case, we are overdue for a break. I want to thank again
Oh,
Tony
yeah.
Thomas and Diane Middleton.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we are going to start the next presentation.